Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. When the lightning bolt struck Bai Xiaochun, he felt an explosive force coursing into his head and then erupting throughout his body. Sparks of electricity showered off of him in all directions. It was a terrifying sight that caused him to shriek in terror. But then, he looked around, blinking for a moment before his eyes lit up. I'm fine? Not only was the electricity not hurting him, but it was actually causing his cultivation base to advance. I can absorb it. This lightning had a different type of life force power than the lightning in Lightning Penitentiary, an energy that caused his undying blood to leap as if with joy. Bai Xiaochun was delighted. Clearly, this lightning existed on a different, higher level than the stuff in the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect. It was much the same way that certain medicinal pills were of higher quality than others, and could help advance one's cultivation in a different way. Although he was very happy, the ghost face was right behind him, just about to enter the area of thunderclouds. Therefore, it was without the slightest hesitation that Bai Xiaochun threw his head back and let out a bellow of agony, as if he were experiencing the most horrific torture. The mere sound of it caused the ghost face to shrink back. Is the lightning that powerful? The ghost face wondered. I feel like allowing him to get struck by lightning is actually letting him off the hook a bit. The ghost face quickly realized that it was impossible to send his divine sense into the lightning or the thunderclouds. Therefore, he could only wait on the outskirts for Bai Xiaochun to be killed, then dash in to retrieve his body. After all, he was very interested in that turtle walk he'd seen. As the ghost face waited for Bai Xiaochun to be struck to death by lightning, Bai Xiaochun was still moving forward, being struck over and over again by lightning. Despite how lovely it felt, he continued to emit blood-curdling screams left and right. After discovering that the cowardly ghost face wasn't going to chase him, he couldn't help but feel a bit of scorn. Apparently, his acting really was doing the job. That bastard is too cautious. That won't do. I need to give him something to work with. With that, he slowed down a bit, and when the next lightning bolt struck, screamed at the top of his lungs and staggered in place, as though he might not be able to continue forward. The ghost face's eyes flickered. He had been watching Bai Xiaochun closely this entire time, but still had not dared to enter the field of lightning. When Bai Xiaochun saw his reaction out of the corner of his eye, he gritted his teeth, allowed some more lightning to strike him, and then sagged visibly as he took a shaky step forward. He's almost dead, the ghost face thought with a cold chuckle. However, a moment later, he frowned as Bai Xiaochun, who he assumed would be killed at any moment, took another lurching step forward. Then he took another step as he began to walk off into the distance. Eventually the ghost face's eyes began to flicker with suspicion. However, it was at that point that more lightning bolts struck Bai Xiaochun, causing him to shudder and then flop over onto the ground, where he lay twitching. Finally, the ghost face unhesitatingly blurred into motion, shooting through the lightning toward Bai Xiaochun. However, even as he closed in, Bai Xiaochun struggled to his feet, his eyes bloodshot as if with exhaustion. Bring it on, he shouted hoarsely. Bai Xiaochun will never give in. Then he took another step forward. The ghost face's suspicions were dispelled by Bai Xiaochun's act, and he pushed forward with greater speed. He's a tough cookie, that's for sure. However, as he closed in, much of the lightning began to focus on him, and no matter how he dodged back and forth, he couldn't avoid being hit. Furthermore, it was to his shock that, despite how powerful he was, the lightning struck him all the way down to his divine soul. Worse, it actually weakened his life force to a certain degree. This lightning is very strange, he thought. He immediately started to get nervous. After all, he was sort of like a tree with no roots. Although he had a huge reserve of life force, he had no way to rebuild it once it was used up. This isn't worth it. I'll just go back, wait until he's dead, and then come get his corpse. With that, the ghost face prepared to turn back. Just as he did, though, Bai Xiaochun let out a trembling scream that was like the tiny burst of flame an oil lamp would emit before winking out. Then, instead of staggering unstably, he lurched forward with a burst of speed, going nearly 3,000 meters in one shot. That attracted even more lightning than usual, which all struck him at once. Twitching spasmodically, he screamed and toppled over onto his face, where he lay unmoving. The ghost face stopped in place and looked over. Unfortunately, divine sense didn't work within the lightning, forcing him to examine the scene with his physical sight only. A moment later, his eyes shone with determination as he headed in Bai Xiaochun's direction. Despite how the lightning struck him, he endured, getting closer and closer. When he was only about 3,000 meters away, Bai Xiaochun suddenly let out a muffled cry. I refuse to go out like this. I still have a bit of energy left. It was as if he were shouting out with the last bit of life he had left in him. Then, to the complete incredulity of the ghost face, he rose shakily to his feet, and then began to trudge forward like the walking dead. How come you're not dead? The ghost face growled angrily. He had been moving fairly quickly, but at the same time, keeping his speed in check. After all, the more quickly one moved in this area, the more lightning one attracted. But now, in his irritation, he decided to go all out. Just as he was beginning to pick up speed, Bai Xiaochun suddenly began to chuckle bitterly, as if he were about to throw caution to the wind. I know what you're after, you old ghost. You want my heaven-earth Tao polarity 9 provinces walk. But even if I die, I'm going to make you pay the price to get it. Cackling madly, he smacked himself on the chest and spat up a huge mouthful of blood to unleash a secret magic. Making it seem like he was burning the last bit of life he had left, he shot forward with a burst of speed, heading directly into a huge convergence of lightning. In the blink of an eye, he was several tens of thousands of meters away, and being struck by numerous lightning bolts. Finally, he collapsed to the ground, dropping the turtle walk down next to him. The ghost face was initially stunned, and his suspicions were starting to grow. After all, the coincidences were really starting to pile up. Now he was faced with a decision: believe or not believe. Maybe he's trying to lure me further in, all in the hopes that I get killed along with him, or at the very least, that I pay a bitter price. HMPH. Well, it's hard to say for sure. And in the end, there's no reason to rush things. Eyes flickering, he began to back up. Eventually, he was free from the life force draining lightning, where he turned back to look at Bai Xiaochun. If you're dead, then considering the strange properties of this place, I can understand why your corpse would remain there the same as before. But if you're not dead, then I refuse to believe that you can just lay there motionless with that lightning striking you. Chuckling coldly, the ghost face decided to wait for a whole month. During that time, Bai Xiaochun didn't so much as twitch. At that point, the ghost face was finally convinced. That treasured walk is mine now. Eyes shining with greed, he entered the lightning for a second time. This time, he didn't hold back at all. He allowed the lightning to strike him constantly as he sped toward Bai Xiaochun. The area where Bai Xiaochun lay was particularly dense in terms of lightning, striking a bit of fear into the ghost face. However, he ignored his fear, and actually picked up speed. It was at that point that a voice could be heard that caused the ghost face's mind to spin. I refuse to die. I still have a bit of energy left. As Bai Xiaochun's weak voice echoed out, he so slowly struggled to his feet, moving for the first time in an entire month. Of course, he was feeling more proud of himself than ever. During his month of lying there motionless, the repeated lightning strikes had advanced his cultivation base significantly. Were it not for the fact that he had long since determined to plot against the ghost face, he would have stood up and started walking around much earlier. When the ghost face heard Bai Xiaochun talking, he let out a bellow of rage. You tricked me, he shouted, his mind spinning on the verge of insanity. If he had possessed a fleshly body, he would definitely have been coughing up blood by now. He truly couldn't understand how Bai Xiaochun could lay there for an entire month and yet not die. Infuriated, he completely ignored the lightning to rush toward Bai Xiaochun. In the face of the enraged ghost face, Bai Xiaochun began to back up. That's right, I tricked you, you old ghost, he said proudly. He began to pick up speed, moving even faster than before. Not only did the lightning bolts that struck seem to not hurt him at all, they actually served to bolster his speed. You. The ghost face was completely shaken that Bai Xiaochun wasn't harmed at all. However, there was no time at the moment to contemplate why that was. As of this moment, he had made his decision: he would not chase Bai Xiaochun. He would flee. Damn it, he thought, how can this guy be so uncanny? Regret and hatred mingled in the ghost face's heart, rising to an incredible degree. Obviously, he could not tangle with Bai Xiaochun in the thundercloud region. At the moment, he had already slipped down to the demigod level, which meant that going further into the lightning would put him in great danger. And based on previous encounters, he knew that despite the fact that Bai Xiaochun was only a diva, it would require an all-out effort to kill him. Don't even think about running, you old ghost, Bai Xiaochun hollered. Come on, let's fight it out to the bitter end. Of course, he didn't actually approach the ghost face. Instead, he unleashed the power of his heaven-span Dharma Eye, sending a beam of violet light out to grab him. The ghost face trembled for a moment, quickly recovering, but unable to avoid the lightning bolts which filled the area. In that brief moment of pause, he was struck by dozens of them. Despite how powerful he was, that many lightning bolts provoked a miserable shriek before he began to flee in rage. But how could Bai Xiaochun let an opportunity like this pass? The backlash from using his heavenspan Dharma eye caused him to cough up blood, but his undying blood was already at work. Within moments, he was recovered and back at work. The ghost face lurched to a brief halt yet again, and this time, more than 100 shocking lightning bolts crashed into him. His screams shook heaven and earth, and even caused the sky to go dim. I'm gonna kill you. Kill you, you hear? I'll skin you alive. I'll eat your flesh. I'll suck the marrow from your bones. The ghost face trembled as his life force was rapidly drained away. Finally, he howled, paying a steep price to break up into 10,000 separate streams of black smoke that fled in all directions. That finally broke him free of the heavenspan Dharma eye. However, despite being in the form of 10,000 separate streams of black smoke, he still couldn't avoid the destructive lightning. Having no other options, he simply tried to get out of the thundercloud region as quickly as possible. Well, aren't you fast? HMPH. Bai Xiaochun wasn't very happy, but had no other tricks up his sleeve at the moment. He could only watch as the more than 10,000 streams of black smoke escaped the thundercloud region, then formed back together into the laughing, crying ghost face. At this point, Bai Xiaochun came to the conclusion that he finally had the upper hand. Looking at the ghost face off in the distance, his battle spirit surged, and he decided to imitate how the Gravekeeper had spoken during the standoff with the Celestial. Pointing directly at the ghost face, he coolly said, "Do you have the guts to come in here, old ghost? Why don't you and I fight a spectacular battle to the death?" The laughing, crying ghost face was so angry he was about to explode. However, he didn't have the courage to enter that sea of lightning. In the brief interchange just now, he had lost about 10% of his total life force. It had taken countless years to build up that life force, and here it was being drained away in the blink of an eye. "Shut your damn mouth, Bai Xiaochun. Do you have the guts to come out?" From the way the ghost face was cursing at Bai Xiaochun, it was obvious how mad he was. "I'll be here as long as this lightning is," Bai Xiaochun replied coolly, emphasizing his words with the flick of his sleeve. "You." The ghost face very nearly descended into insanity because of those words alone. He truly had never encountered anyone this shameless, and he was almost unable to hold back from rushing in to try to kill Bai Xiaochun, regardless of the cost. Unfortunately, he simply couldn't afford to lose that much life force, and therefore, he had to endure the deadlock with gritted teeth. "If you even come close to having what it takes, Bai Xiaochun, then come out and fight me. I'll definitely kill you." With that, the ghost face spun angrily, worried that he might give in to impulse if he stuck around locking horns with Bai Xiaochun. "If you've got any skill, you spineless ghost, then come in here and fight." With that, Bai Xiaochun flicked his sleeve, stuck his chin up, and sighed deeply. With the flick of a sleeve, I, Bai Xiaochun, caused this demigod ghost to flee at the sight of me. When the ghost face heard that, he gritted his teeth in fury, but reminded himself that he couldn't let himself be goaded, and continued to depart at top speed. And thus, the thundercloud region became the line of demarcation. One party wouldn't enter it, and the other wouldn't leave it. Bai Xiaochun was very pleased with that. Feeling wonderful, he began to speed further into the depths of the thundercloud area, absorbing lightning every step of the way. Eventually, he reached the very center of the region, where there was so much lightning that it was almost impossible to see clearly. There, he sat down cross-legged, and began to work on his cultivation. "One of these days I'm going to show that old ghost a thing or two." Snorting coldly, he closed his eyes and began to meditate. The lightning here contained both life force and the energy of heaven and earth. To Bai Xiaochun, it was even more beneficial than the lightning in the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect, and caused his cultivation base to make constant progress. In addition, his undying blood was getting very close to the 50% level. As for the ghost face, he left and cooled down a bit. Then he spent some more time trying to think of a way to take control of the magical item. However, in the end, he could only sigh and dispel such thoughts. "What's done is done. The only thing I can do now is get out of here and try to take control of it from the outside." Eyes glittering, he went about trying to determine if the magical item had an exit. Time passed. A year flew by. During that time, Bai Xiaochun was completely focused on cultivation. It wasn't that he was particularly interested in cultivation at the moment, but rather, that he had nothing else to do. And considering that he didn't dare to leave the thundercloud region, he was basically stuck with cultivation as his only option. The laughing, crying ghost face continued to descend into madness. He had come to the realization that there was no exit and no way out, no matter what he did. Now that he realized he was trapped, his mood only got worse. If that were all there were to the situation, it might not have been a big deal. After all, he was confident that he would be able to get out sooner or later. However, he soon realized that his cultivation base was slowly being suppressed. By now, he had slipped from having demigod battle prowess, all the way down to the quasi-demigod level. To his anxiety, he realized that it was likely the spirit automaton of the magical item that was doing this to him. And worse, this was only the beginning. As time went on, the limitations would grow more severe. How could this be happening? He howled in panicked rage. All of a sudden he realized that his luck had taken a turn for the worse from the moment he encountered Bai Xiaochun. Meanwhile, neither the ghost face nor Bai Xiaochun had any way to know that while they were trapped in the world of the magical item, things were happening out in the lands of Heavenspan. The Celestial had issued orders that the 4 river source sects, as well as the sects from the middle and lower reaches, begin to prepare for war. 10,000 years had passed since the last great war with the wildlands, and the time had come for another one to begin. This time, the Great Wall had collapsed, and the Deadmire was no longer what it used to be. It was easy to imagine how deadly and destructive this war would be. In reality, it was a war that had begun much earlier. If the Celestial had won that spectacular battle in the wildlands, the fighting would have broken out immediately. But he had lost that showdown, and then met defeat again on the Bone Galleon. These successive losses ate away at the Celestial's patience. And it was made worse by the fact that Big Fatty Zhang and some other lower-level cultivators had actually left the world, while he remained behind, stuck. Gravekeeper, you bastard, I know you have even more backup plans. But I'm done playing games. Eyes flickering with madness, the Celestial issued his dharmic decree. The wildlands were to be destroyed. The Gravekeeper was to be killed. The Hell Emperor was to be executed. Perhaps it would destroy the heavens and crush the earth. Perhaps it would end the world. But at least the Celestial would finally become the true ruler of it all, and thus achieve his long-cherished wish of opening the world gate. The Celestial's dharmic decree sent all of the lands of Heavenspan into action. Whether they wanted to or not, all cultivators and all sects were to participate in the war effort. Only a few people knew the true reasons for what was happening. For the rest, it was enough to know that the wildlands and the Heavenspan River had a feud that went back many years. As the sects in the lands of Heavenspan prepared for war, the Grand Heavenmaster in the wildlands finally relinquished official control of the empire to the Arch-Emperor. Countless tribes of savage giants were mobilized, and the 4 heavenly kings marshaled their 4 enormous armies. It was with great fanfare that all of the wildlands prepared to go to war. The 10 heavenly dukes, the more than 100 heavenly marquises, and countless necromancer clans were all marshalling their forces. As the Sergeant Major of the Giant Ghost Legion, Mistress Red Dust had already donned her battle armor, and stood at the front of an endless army of cultivators, bristling with a murderous aura as she stared in the direction of the lands of Heavenspan. However, deep within her eyes, in a place where no one could see, were complicated emotions and thoughts. She wasn't the only one thinking about Bai Xiaochun. Chen Manyao, the Hell Emperor, Zhou Hong, and many other people who now knew who Bai Xiaochun really was were all thinking about him. The truth was that from the moment the Great Wall fell, many people had been waiting for this war to come. And now, it was here. In the shortest of times, both the wildlands and the Heavenspan River region were completely abuzz. One of the only peaceful places in the world was inside the magical item in which Bai Xiaochun was currently stuck. To him, it was a holy land of cultivation. To the laughing crying ghost face, it was a hellish prison. Whether it was the stifling pressure of the magical item, or the despair the ghost face felt at not being able to find an exit, he was sure that he was about to be driven completely insane. Even worse was that the lightning seemed to be growing weaker, and Bai Xiaochun's aura, stronger. The ghost face could sense that Bai Xiaochun was nearing the late Diva realm, which caused his mind to reel. Why does it have to be this way? How come that bastard can absorb the spiritual energy here, but I can't? Damn it. If he were stuck just like me, it wouldn't be a big deal. But he can actually increase his cultivation base. The ghost face howled to the heavens in madness, but it did no good. With every day that passed, he grew weaker, and his opponent grew stronger. Obviously, it would eventually reach the point where he wasn't a match in a fight. It's not fair. The mere thought of what might happen caused the ghost face to shiver in despair. Filled with a sense of madness, he began to desperately search for an exit again, which suddenly caused him to think of the Celestial, who was apparently in a very similar state of mind. I have to get out, he thought, nearly weeping as he searched and searched. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun was doing everything he could to increase his cultivation base. As he did, less and less lightning was visible. The spiritual energy in the magical item had built up for countless years, but now, Bai Xiaochun was slowly absorbing it into himself. Under most circumstances, he would have had a difficult time focusing solely on cultivation for so long. But in the world of the magical item, with the ghost face as such a huge threat, he was very anxious, and was working harder than ever. That ghost face is terrifying, he sighed. Considering the pressure he was currently feeling, he was going all out, much the same way he had back in the Spirit Stream sect when he was studying plants and vegetation. As he absorbed the lightning, his cultivation base increased, and before long, he could push his Cloud Lightning Forefather transformation all the way to the 6th transformation. However, things weren't over yet. Before long, he reached the 7th transformation, which simultaneously pushed him closer and closer to the peak of the mid-diva realm. As his aura grew stronger, colors flashed in the sky of the world, and a powerful wind screamed. I'm so strong now. Once I break through to the late diva realm, I should be able to fight that ghost face. Filled with excitement, he went on to absorb more lightning. In contrast, the ghost face's trepidation grew more intense with every day that passed. As he saw himself growing weaker and weaker, he sank deeper and deeper into despair. In addition to the spiritual energy that was in the lightning, there was also abundant life force, which Bai Xiaochun didn't hesitate to absorb. It had a shocking effect on his undying blood. As his cultivation base broke through into the peak of the mid-diva realm, his undying blood reached the 50% level. When that happened, his eyes shone brightly with pride. However, before he could revel in his excitement, rumbling sounds echoed out as all of the lightning vanished completely. Bai Xiaochun opened his eyes and looked around to find the entire area empty. At the same time, the ghost face was visible at the edge of the thundercloud region, looking equally shocked. In that instant, the ghost face went mad with joy. Cackling loudly, he burst into motion. This time, you're dead, Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun shivered in fear and began to back up. Damn it, why is this thundercloud region so unstable? After absorbing lightning for so long, it went empty, just like that? The sight of the ghost face rushing toward him caused his scalp to tingle so hard it felt like it might explode. Without any further hesitation, he began to flee at top speed, using his undying hex to vanish, reappear off in the distance, and then continue onward in a blur. Behind him, the ghost face was virtually going crazy. Despite having his cultivation base suppressed, he was going all out to get to Bai Xiaochun. He could tell that if he didn't take advantage of this chance to kill the damnable Bai Xiaochun now, and his cultivation base dropped further, then the next time they met, he wouldn't qualify to fight him. That terrifying possibility fueled the ghost face's mad rush forward. Bai Xiaochun, he howled in madness, teleporting out of the thundercloud region to appear only about 300 meters behind Bai Xiaochun. Then he focused all of the demigod power he could, sending out crushing force in the hopes of smashing Bai Xiaochun to bits. Nearly overwhelmed by the sensation of crisis, Bai Xiaochun unleashed the power of his mid-diva realm cultivation base, combining it with all of the energy from his undying blood. Then, he used it to power his undying hex, ensuring that he vanished before the ghost face's blow could land. Blood sprayed out of Bai Xiaochun's mouth as he reappeared, which he quickly wiped away. The truth was that it actually didn't matter what injuries he sustained like this. His undying blood was so powerful that he almost completely recovered in only moments. In fact, he had even been able to borrow some of the momentum of the incoming attack to flee more quickly. He shot away in a bright beam of light, moving at incredible speed as the ghost face chased after him, attacking relentlessly. One glob of black smoke after another shot out, but Bai Xiaochun avoided them all. Although he ended up coughing up blood as a result, overall, he wasn't even starting to feel tired. As for the ghost face, he was so depressed he felt like collapsing mentally. Damn it, even though I'm weaker than normal, I still don't get how can this guy run away from me so quickly. Bai Xiaochun was so focused on fleeing for his life that he wasn't paying any attention to how much faster he was than his pursuer. He was only thinking about getting away as quickly as possible. Whooshing and whistling sounds echoed out in all directions as he became a blur of afterimages that split the air. In fact, it was actually impossible to tell which one of them was his true form. The ghost face was going so crazy that he even used a trump card divine ability, causing the smoke which surrounded him to condense down into a sphere. However, he simply couldn't close the distance as Bai Xiaochun headed to the wind valleys. No, he wailed. He pushed forward with a burst of cultivation base power, causing the black sphere to transform into numerous black arrows that shot toward Bai Xiaochun. There were so many of them that they were impossible to count, a sight which caused Bai Xiaochun to scream in fear when he noticed. He was using the Undying Hex, the Mountain Shaking Bash, and every other magical technique he could think of, even the Cloud Lightning Forefather transformation. Even as the black arrows were about to hit him, he entered the wind valleys. At that point, the arrows exploded, creating a powerful attack that shot into the wind valleys after him. Blood sprayed out of Bai Xiaochun's mouth, but he didn't even look over his shoulder. He just shot deeper into the wind valleys to immediately be assailed by the powerful, biting winds. However, as soon as any wind touched him, it transformed into a shocking energy of heaven and earth that entered his pores and began to flow through his body. Unfortunately, Bai Xiaochun was in no mood to even notice that. He continued to speed along, coughing up blood over and over. Only when he was deep in the wind valleys did he finally stop, panting, and look around to make sure he was alone. At that point, he turned around and realized that the ghost face hadn't pursued him into the valleys. Finally, he sighed in relief. "Think you can kill Lord Bai, you old ghost? Stop dreaming." At this point, he looked around more closely, and realized that the screaming winds were doing exactly what the lightning had done, filling him with both spiritual power and life force. Immediately, he brightened up. HMPH. A gentleman can wait for a decade to get revenge if he needs to. And since I, Bai Xiaochun, am a gentleman, I'll just wait until I have my cultivation base breakthrough, and then I'll go beat the crap out of that old ghost. The mere thought of the scene which had just played out caused his heart to tremble in fear. And yet, there was also something odd about it. Now that I think about it, that old ghost seemed weaker than before. He couldn't even catch up to me. Shaking his head, he thought back to how the baby girl had said that as she gained more control over the world, she would suppress the ghost face. One factor must be that my improved cultivation base gives me greater speed. The other is that the ghost face is being suppressed. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he started to get so excited that his eyes lit up. Until the baby girl wakes up, there's no way to get out of here. That means the old ghost is trapped just like me, and getting weaker constantly. Meanwhile, I'm getting stronger. The more he thought about it, the more excited he got. Finally, he looked off into the distance and shouted, "You just wait, you old ghost. Once I break through, I'll beat you so badly that ghost mother won't even recognize you. If I don't, then my name's not Bai Xiaochun." He powered his voice with his cultivation base power so that it echoed out of the wind valleys and all the way to the livid ghost face. "Bai Xiaochun," he howled in frustration. After chasing Bai Xiaochun to the wind valleys and then seeing that the wind didn't affect him, the ghost face truly felt himself descending into insanity. The winds seemed to almost treat Bai Xiaochun like their own ancestor. At this point, the ghost face decided to try to step into the winds himself, only to find that they almost tore his soul body to shreds, and also took away some of his life force. He immediately backed away. Bai Xiaochun had fled as quickly as a mouse with its tail on fire, and was soon in the depths of the wind valleys, leaving the ghost face feeling completely helpless, and cursing heaven and earth for the vile way they treated him. He knew that if things kept going this way, then he was truly finished. The mere thought of Bai Xiaochun experiencing a breakthrough in the wind valleys caused the ghost face's expression to turn very grim. This guy will seek revenge over the smallest grievance. If he breaks through, the ghost face couldn't have felt more regret. By now, he realized that he really shouldn't have come into this damned magical item with Bai Xiaochun. How can this guy be so unreasonable? Turning around, he fled to yet again try to find a way out. If the ghost face had ever met any disciples from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect or the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect, perhaps those disciples would have told him that what was truly terrifying about Bai Xiaochun wasn't any so-called unreasonableness, but rather, his infinitely powerful ability to cause disasters. After all, both river source sects had borne witness to the fact that, given the right circumstances and resources, he could very nearly destroy the world. Before long, half a year had gone by. During that time, the war preparations were completed, and the campaign that the Celestial wanted finally began. The forces of the Heavenspan River region invaded the wildlands on 4 fronts. The 4 massive armies were led by the river source sects, and filled in with the forces of the middle and lower reaches. The wildlands fought back primarily with the armies of the 4 heavenly kings, each of whom faced one of the river source sects. The war had begun. Neither Bai Xiaochun nor the ghost face were aware of this development. If Bai Xiaochun had known, he would have been profoundly nervous, and would likely have been incapable of focusing on cultivation. As for the ghost face, if he had known, he would have been filled with even more regret at having followed Bai Xiaochun into this desolate place. In the outside world, a war between the wildlands and the Heavenspan forces would have been a goldmine for him. He could have consumed people left and right, and would have eventually reached a peak level of cultivation base power that would have enabled him to manipulate the war to his own benefit. Instead, the ghost face was hiding in a low-lying mountain, his heart filled with humiliation, viciousness, and terror. The reason for that was that during the past half year, his cultivation base had continued to drop. As of this point, he was no longer as strong as a demigod, but rather, in the great circle of the Diva realm. It was like a living nightmare that he almost couldn't believe was real. After dropping so far in his cultivation base, he finally reached the point where he didn't dare to go outside. Therefore, he had remained in hiding for a full 3 months. A while back, he had been wavering on whether or not to simply go into the wind valleys and try to find Bai Xiaochun. However, he would now be incapable of killing him even if he found him. Even worse was the aura he could sense in the wind valleys, which was now getting very close to the late Diva realm. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Grief and indignation filled him as he thought about how powerful Bai Xiaochun was now. After all, his own power level was now equivalent to the great circle of the Diva realm. If Bai Xiaochun broke through, the consequences would be unimaginable. Why does it have to be this way? He moaned, grabbing the smoke that made up his hair and tugging on it viciously. In his fear, he could only cautiously focus on Bai Xiaochun's aura and its progress. A few more months passed, and the ghost face's cultivation base dropped further. He was now in the late Diva realm. Worse, he could sense the raging aura in the wind valleys, and it caused him to shiver in fear. Fail, fail, I curse you to fail. And thus the ghost sat there, nervously cursing Bai Xiaochun. Unfortunately for him, Bai Xiaochun's aura only continued to get more powerful. In the end, he achieved his breakthrough, and stepped into the late Diva realm. At that point, the ghost face wailed in despair. It was also in that moment that a pleased voice erupted from within the wind valleys. All right, you old ghost. Lord Bai is coming for you. As soon as the ghost face heard those words, he shivered, causing countless streams of black smoke to spread out in all directions. However, after a long moment passed, and Bai Xiaochun still hadn't come out from the wind valleys, the ghost face looked over in shock, then began to curse inwardly. Back in the wind valleys, Bai Xiaochun cleared his throat, savoring the feeling of his breakthrough, and the majestic cultivation base power that he now possessed. Late Diva realm, he thought. I, Bai Xiaochun, am finally in the late Diva realm. Eyes shining with excitement, he once again raised his voice and said, all right, you old ghost. Lord Bai is really coming for you this time. Outside, the ghost face's expression turned dark with rage. However, since he was made from black smoke, it was difficult to see how dark it actually was. By now, Bai Xiaochun could tell that he could reach the 8th of the Cloud Lightning Forefather transformations. My 8th transformation is actually equivalent to the 11th. Although he couldn't say that he was invincible in all creation, he was definitely close. And my undying blood. Licking his lips, he studied his undying blood, and confirmed that he had broken through in that regard as well. As of this moment, 60% of the blood in his body was undying blood. That made his powers of regeneration even more shocking than before. In terms of his own life force, he was now fairly certain that, even if heaven and earth were destroyed around him, he would not be destroyed. This is unheard of strength, he thought, feeling more confident in himself than ever. Nobody under the level of a demigod could beat me. In his pride, he couldn't help but raise his voice again. All right, old ghost, this time, I really am coming over there. At that point, his eyes suddenly flickered. Why isn't the old ghost responding to me? It seems his cultivation base really must be dropping. During the time he had been working on reaching the late Diva realm, he hadn't stopped paying any attention to things outside of the wind valleys. Because of that, he could sense that, thanks to the pressure of the magical item, the ghost face's cultivation base had dropped. That, coupled with his taunts from earlier, confirmed everything. Eyes shining with determination, he shot into motion, leaving the wind valleys and appearing in the world beyond them. Bai Xiaochun seemed like the wind itself, a hurricane that blasted across the lands with explosive power. Although he looked quite impressive, he was actually being very cautious, and was ready to fall back at a moment's notice. But after emerging into the open and blinking a few times, he realized that the ghost face was nowhere to be seen. Eyes lighting up, he sent some divine sense out, causing heaven and earth to distort from the sheer force. Within moments, the entire world of the magical item was visible via his late Diva realm divine sense. It only took a moment before he found the ghost face, fleeing in the opposite direction. The instant Bai Xiaochun's divine sense locked onto him, he confirmed that he had dropped into the late Diva realm. Bai Xiaochun immediately roared with laughter, causing all of the anxiety that had built up since he had arrived in the magical item to drain away. He suddenly felt carefree and excited as he began to give chase. Want to race with Lord Bai, you old ghost? With that, he drew upon the full power of his cultivation base, using the undying hex and the mountain-shaking bash together to rocket through the air and appear right behind the ghost face. The ghost face's expression was unsightly to the extreme, and fury burned in his heart. Even as he fled in absolute disgrace, he opened his mouth and shouted, causing countless smoke mouths to suddenly shoot toward Bai Xiaochun. Shocked, Bai Xiaochun backed up and performed a double-handed incantation gesture, sending frigid qi out to meet the gaping mouths. As soon as the two met, the seemingly shocking mouths collapsed into bits of black smoke. Meanwhile, the blast of frigid qi proceeded directly toward the ghost face. Cursing bitterly, the ghost face continued to flee. In contrast, Bai Xiaochun's eyes were shining brightly. Laughing heartily, he clenched his right hand into a fist and punched out. Rumbling booms filled the area as the blow hit the ghost face, causing the smoke he was composed of to roil unstably. Don't push things too far, Bai Xiaochun. Do you dare to fight with Lord Bai, you old ghost? With that, he used the 8th Cloud Lightning Forefather transformation, growing to a height of 240 meters and bursting with energy. The moon sigil in his left eye shone radiantly, pushing his battle prowess to even higher heights. Although he wasn't quite at the demigod level, he was certainly very close. Waving his hand, he attacked again, and the ghost face was powerless to fight back. The situation between the two of them had been completely reversed, and despite the fact that the ghost face had known this would happen, it was still difficult to accept it. A boom rang out, and the ghost face was shattered by Bai Xiaochun's fist strike. The innumerable strands of black smoke quickly formed back into the image of the ghost face, who was experiencing something he had never before experienced. Long ago, Ghost Mother had relied on the backing of an Archean to capture him, and had also treated him very politely. Here, Bai Xiaochun, a person the ghost face could crush easily were his cultivation base not suppressed, was smacking him around with deadly force. The ghost face was so angry that his voice quavered as he shouted, "Don't force my hand, Bai Xiaochun." "Fudge, I'm not forcing you to do anything. I'm just beating you." Bai Xiaochun felt wonderful at having all the stress from before melt away, to be replaced by remarkable joy. Shouting at the top of his lungs, he strode forward and unleashed another fist strike. More booms rang out. "Who forced you to try to kill me before?" Another fist strike. The ghost face couldn't dodge out of the way in time. No amount of shrieking or divine abilities or magical techniques did any good. Yet again, his body collapsed, to be reformed a moment later. "Who forced you to chase me into this place?" Bai Xiaochun struck out with his fist again. "Who forced you to keep chasing me once we got stuck inside? I ran into that thundercloud region, and you still wouldn't let me go. The lightning dispersed, and you started chasing me again." He emphasized everything he said with a fist strike, each of which caused the ghost face to shatter and reform. "I'm gonna kill you, Bai Xiaochun," the ghost face howled madly. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore, and lunged at Bai Xiaochun. However, before he could get close, Bai Xiaochun leaned back and kicked out, planting his foot directly onto the ghost face. "Quite the bragger, aren't we? Still think you can kill me?" The ghost face broke apart and then formed back together, whereupon Bai Xiaochun shattered him again. Finally, he reached out, grabbed the ghost face by his smoke hair, and smashed him down onto the ground. He wasn't even using divine abilities, only his fleshly body power, and the force of the Cloud Lightning Forefather transformation. Screams rang out as Bai Xiaochun trampled on the ghost face, which shattered and reformed the entire time. Eventually, it burned some life force to try to flee. Flicking his sleeve, Bai Xiaochun stuck his chin up and proudly said, "Think you can just run? If I don't beat the crap out of you until you cry uncle, then my name isn't Bai Xiaochun." With that, he continued to give chase. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.